Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to explore three little stories throughout my life, which hopefully will illustrate how Buddhism has broken into my life. So, to start with, right at the beginning, I grew up the oldest of 5 children in quite a pretty comfortable background, kind of semi-rural environment. Both my parents were engineering directors, so growing up, a lot of emphasis was on academic success, perfection within academic realms, and also in a sense that academia would lead to a good career and therefore freedom in a way. So unfortunately, that then resulted in myself being quite an anxious young child. And also kind of a very much so deep overthinking child. My entire identity really rested on academic success, which wasn't a surprise, scoring highly on any test that I took, and even the thought of one incorrect answer in anything I did kind of really held like a shameful and a lot of weight behind it. My mum was a Christian, she still is quite a devout Christian, and therefore by virtue, so was the rest of the family. So every Sunday, almost like clockwork, it would be 2 hours at church, then followed by another 2 hours at Sunday school. Particularly remember how cold, dark, damp, depressing, and rather ominous those environments were. And I've certainly coloured in my fair share of Jesuses. So when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I kind of realised at some point that with this Christianity, I really was just going through the motions, and kind of certain doubts began to come up in my mind about, actually, is any of this really real? I heard time and time again, like similar stories. I understood what the meaning was behind them, but actually for me, they didn't really resonate with me on a deep level at all. It just felt like on the Sunday, another chore to do, and as soon as that was over, I could go to Sunday lunch, which was fantastic. So, growing up, the family had a ginger cat called Einstein. I didn't choose the name, but I was very close with Einstein. I absolutely loved him to bits. However, looking back, it was definitely one of those one-way relationships, and I don't think he had a choice in which, I didn't get a lot of love back from Einstein. Unfortunately, Einstein didn't really live up to his namesake, and in a rather non-genius moment, managed to get himself run over and killed on the A120. So that really was my first experience of death and grief. I'd had a relative pass away a few years before, but I wasn't really close to them at all, so I didn't really connect with that. But with Einstein, I was distraught as a young child. And I remember going to my mum, a very devout Christian, and as most Christians will say, don't worry, he's gone to heaven. And I thought, okay, good. But then actually, as a child, I was like, oh, hang on a minute, that's fantastic, because I thought only humans went to heaven. And animals go as well, that's great. And then all of a sudden I sort of paused in my overthinking manner. And I thought, hang on, does that mean all around the world, all animals that have ever existed are now in heaven? And my mum at this point was probably like making tea for like all of us. And I go, yeah, okay, yeah, Elizabeth, that's correct. And for me, I was like, that actually really troubled me. Because, like, logistically, how is that gonna work? Like, you've got savannas full of like elephants and cats. Yeah, it just didn't work in my mind. So this was one of my many confirmations that actually Christianity didn't align with what I truly knew was the truth. So instinctively, deep down, as a child, I really knew that it was something more to life, something intangible, something wider than consciousness itself, and really in the way things worked. As I said, I was a bit of a deep thinker. And Christianity just did not employ me with any of those at all. So, moving on to the second little story. A lot of time passed, and there were quite a lot of things going on at home and I was deeply unhappy, which resulted in me leaving the family home at 15. I ended up in a homeless shelter in the Midlands, and then moved to a town in which I had my own place, which was fantastic. I was just starting out my A-levels and at the time, but also needed to work as a way to survive. So I took on quite a variety of jobs at the time, from cleaning to becoming a petrol station forecourt assistant, and I also was the baker for the local co-op, which employed me being in a very unattractive hat at 5 a.m. most mornings. I then went off to uni to do the course of my dreams. It's one I've worked really hard to get into, and I was also back on the normal track of life that I thought, and one that I felt that I needed to be on. However, I then had quite a lost sense of who I was. I was then suddenly surrounded with a lot of people with almost immense privilege and people who hadn't really had any diverse experience at all. And for me, this actually really deeply frustrated me. Once I then started my professional career, I'd left forecourt assisting behind, I then realised I was rather tired. So I thought, what will abide all of my deep-seated frustrations, exhaustion, anger, dissatisfaction with life, can't speak. I'll just go on holiday. That'll sort it all out. So I'm not sure if you can tell, but for me, a holiday, clubbing in Ibiza, Benidorm or Marbella isn't quite my vibe. So instead, for most of my years in my 20s, I actually backpacked solo across some more quirky locations, such as Guatemala, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, etc. Looking back, perhaps I was really looking for freedom in kind of outside of the narrow perspective of what the UK or indeed Western Europe offers, and all of the cultural elements of that as well. So, whilst trying to find myself on each of these adventures, I always, without fail, ended up at a Buddhist monastery, a monument, or a temple. It really felt like I was being kind of unconsciously drawn to these places, and for a reason that was completely unknown to me at the time. I particularly have a strong memory of visiting a Buddhist temple in Indonesia and kind of just walking around the grounds and really feeling already that I was part of that community, but I didn't know it. So I just, joined in, and it was phenomenal. I also remember seeing some Buddhist monks and almost being envious, actually, of their deepened sense of awareness and actual wider perspective. They just seemed extremely calm and serene. On to the third story. So moving more into my late 20s, I thought I had made it in my younger self's eyes. So I was then a chartered surveyor, a consultant, and I travelled all around the world for work. Absolutely loved it. I lived in London, had a really good social life. My life was really busy and really packed with everything I thought that I had strived to want and to get. However, in reality, my life was kind of a mesh of soulless, pointless, and unfulfilling adventures. It wasn't that bad, but retrospectively. From achieving various milestones within the career atmosphere, networking, relationships, and a constant, endless comparison to others. Realising this, and really truly wanting to gain that freedom that I spoke about, I realised that all I needed to do was categorise every section of my life, rate it on a current level of potential success, and devise and implement a strategy plan. And this was also coupled with a very detailed vision board, which consisted of a moderate house in the countryside, a walk-in wardrobe, and a border collie. That's all I wanted. I would be set for life. But I wasn't. One slight major part of this strategy I devised was, and it was always failing, was my mental state. So consistently at that time, my mind was in a state of propantia, consistently ruminating, overthinking, may have stemmed from my childhood, and turning over every scenario, conversation, possibility even with people who didn't even know I existed. So, looking back, I was probably most likely suffering from quite a bit of stress and anxiety. And overall was actually really deeply unhappy. And I think looking back as well, I wasn't connected to any truer, deeper sense of purpose. And this led to more unskillful action. So, as many would, I turned to Dr. Google, sorry. I then came to the conclusion that exercise, this was what was going to be my way out of this mental prison that I had. So I then pursued my passion for the outdoors and began to hike quite a lot. I found that when I hiked, I came back, I felt fantastic, calm, serene, kind of a bit more like myself. But that wasn't enough, so I hiked a bit more. I did long distance hikes, and then after a while, that wasn't enough. So I started running. Realising, thankfully, quite soon after that, I realised that actually wasn't really helping, and it really wasn't cutting the mustard on a grander scale. So given my rather obsessive and also addictive tendencies, I turned to the plethora of self-help publications and material to find the answer, what was going to sort me out. This then led me to meditation. So meditation at the time was actually really alien to me. And perhaps at the time I presumed it was just going to be another one of those things that I'd add on to the strategy list, a thing to do along with going for a run or eating a healthy diet. After a couple of sessions of meditation at the LBC, I strongly felt this connection to almost another different part of myself, and also knew instinctively that this really was something quite inexplicably special and phenomenal and ethereal, and I could only start to begin to imagine what this really meant for me. So this then led me to the Dharma, and I know deeply that this would lead me to the truest sense of freedom. So, to conclude, you'll be pleased to know I still have a border collie on my vision board. However, the orientation of my strategy and vision board is now turned towards my commitment to my practice, deepening my awareness, and also to leave a dharmic life.